You say to America is be true to what you said on paper.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within.
Good morning. Welcome back to the second hour at the Roundtable with MAMLEO. I'm your host, Larry Elson, in studio with my brothers from another. We are not with the Hair Club of America. This is actually at the Roundtable with MAMLEO.
We're with the Ball Society.
The Ball Society. Right. So wasn't the bald eagle that was the symbol of America?
Society. Exactly.
Bald black man. Yeah.
That's right.
So Dr. Bradley is over there. He's with us this morning. Good morning, my brother. How are you?
I'm blessed and highly favored, dog.
Yeah, listen, you're about to take to the sky. Good
I was
luck.
on the father's wake up list this morning, so I'm doing well, dog.
You answered the call.
Yes. Yeah, I'm about to. In fact, this is. I won't be here for a couple of weeks.
Hey, your daughter's getting married.
We're heading to Italy.
Yeah. Okay.
As of Thursday.
Yeah. Hopefully, Americans are still welcome.
Well, hey, it is what it is. You know what I mean? I said to my wife, I don't know if I want to leave. I might not be able to get back in. Look at me. I might not be able to get back in. She was like, no, you'll get in. You'll get in.
Okay.
No, but we're blessed. We'll be going to Germany, then Italy, going to Rome, going to Tuscany, Venice, and the place with the Leaning Tower, Pisa.
Leaning Tower, Pisa.
Yeah, we're going to go there.
A little bit more there.
Yeah, so we'll have some time. Spend some time with the family.
All right. And good morning, Pastor Hobbs. How are you, sir?
I am well by the grace of God.
All right. He's a walking billboard. We don't need accolade. We got Pastor Hobbs. You know? He's a billboard.
This brother got on layers of advertisement.
Community. I love it. And our guest, our co-host for today, Brother Jimmy. How are you, sir?
I am well.
Jimmy Marshall, grew up in the city here.
Right on OP.
You down with OPP? You know me, right? It's funny because I have a lot of friends from down there. Matter of fact, you might know the Butts family.
Familiar.
Yeah. What's his name? I forget his. He was the famous three-card Monty. Jay.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, I went to school with his brother Roshan. We still stay in touch. We're very close friends, and we communicate. And
he was actually an intelligent brother too.
Yes. This is saying this with a lot of talent. There were a lot of things that came into our community that almost intentionally to destroy it, right? Because it wasn't the violence there. You didn't feel some of that apprehension that you kind of feel now. You kind of like, all right, we're staying in our own pockets and we don't get to know each other. So those things we've got to bring that type of relationship back. So Jimmy is here. He's talking about his time in incarceration and how do we move some of these impediments out of the way. You know, the 15-year-old that he was discussing in our 7 o'clock hour that is in need of help. And sadly, we all probably know of 15-year-olds or younger, sadly, who need those type of services. And we're here trying to come up with some solutions how we can get out of our silo operation and work as a community. Because most people would say, well, wait a minute. Someone who spent time, and last week we had folks saying as well, is that this broadcast, this is what we want to engage and talk about, real talk, right? Like when Jimmy came in and said, look, don't be nervous, brother. It's like being at the kitchen table. And now we know he's feeling comfortable because he's got on his glasses, right? He's ready to be prominent there. He's looking, he knows he's looking in the camera, and he's comfortable. And this is what we want. This, if you have any issues out there, and this is you, Jimmy, as well as our listeners, and you want to discuss, this is the platform. We're giving it to you. We want to make this a regular conversation about what is ailing our community and how we can help. We're part of the community. Our jobs doesn't separate us.
Which is why I want, if I can dovetail in on this, this is why it's important to support this radio station, to support this platform.
That's right.
We're always available. We're always in need of financial support. We all are, but this platform is the only game in town that I know of where you can come in and you can sit down and have these real kitchen table issues and discuss them and get, feedback from the community and from people. This is, in fact, this show, now that I think about it, is very rare. where you have former police officers talking about policing and the ill of policing in our community. That is a whole different,
And I think,
different
correct me
approach.
I think for me, this therapy, it helps with that trauma, right? Because you feel like it's us against them, right? And knowing, oh, well, not all of them are under that mindset, right? And we're going to get into a little bit of that, and we're going to kind of pivot back and forth here because, you know, Dr. Bradley, current police commissioner Michael Cox, who's the police commissioner here in the city of Boston, he visited MAMLEO shortly after he was installed as the new police commissioner here in the city of Boston. He came to MAMLEO's Christmas party. I guess he must have come as Scrooge, right? Because when he came, let me lay this out for folks so they completely understand and why 15-year-olds should be concerned and the whole community should be concerned. And this is with the blessing of our current mayor, Michelle Wu. Under the former chief Greg Long, who was the acting police commissioner in the Boston Police Department when Mayor Wu first became mayor, every four-star superintendent, you see people that have 3 stars or 4 stars. A 4-star is usually the bureau chief. Dr. Bradley was a 3-star deputy superintendent. He ran the communications in the Boston Police Department, right? So he was in that leadership role. So he knows better than I. I say that because at that time, Greg Long, white male, every other 4-star except for one of leadership in the Boston Police Department was a person of color. So that's the chief of patrol, the chief of detectives, the police academy, the chief of staff, every single one. We're talking about probably 10 to 12 positions were all held by people of color. Michael Cox came to MAMLEO's headquarters, and it was for MAMLEO's Christmas party, and I was in attendance then. And he said up there that he noticed that there were so many black people in leadership in the Boston Police Department. And he followed up with saying, don't get used to it. And since his time, and I guess yesterday was the final assault on that, he started dismantling black people in leadership, right? We had a black person in charge of patrol, which is the largest bureau in the Boston Police Department. We had a black person in charge of the detective bureau, which is the second largest. And we had a person of color in charge of our internal affairs, which investigates any complaints of abuse and neglect in the city of police officers and civilians of the Boston Police Department. As of yesterday, the chief of patrol is now a white male, and his assistant is a white male. The chief of detectives is a white male, and his assistant is a white male. The chief of the internal affairs is now a white male. There are no females in any real leadership in the Boston Police Department, black or white. So this is and Mayor Wu was at this ceremony yesterday, giving it her blessing that this was okay to see the regression in the Boston Police Department when it comes to gains of people of color. Now, there's still some that have 4 stars, but they're not all equal. And I told you, don't be fooled by that. All of the real leadership in the Boston Police Department, he actually brought back, and I told people that was the start of it. Ed Davis is by proxy running the Boston Police Department, the former police commissioner who, in my opinion, was instrumental in Michael Cox getting this role as the current police commissioner, right? And the person who Michael Cox tapped and brought back to be his chief of staff in the Boston Police Department was the legal advisor to Ed Davis, who she was putting the boot to black people, right? Firing more black people under her in the as the leader of the legal for the police department, had left, and he brought her back as his chief of staff. So when he's in the room, other than his one friend who he did elevate to the number 2 position in the Boston Police Department, when he's in the room with the people that actually matter, it's like you can almost take a picture of Donald Trump and transplant it and look at it and say, wow, this is what the Boston Police Department looks like today. So we've regressed under a black police commissioner, and Greg Long actually promoted more black people, and so if his attitude is but I think what he's also leaving in people's mind that we had to be replaced by someone who is superior to us, and these people inferior, and that's why they're no longer in leadership, and he's got to have all white males surrounding him, and it's one white female who is, in my opinion, was detrimental to black people and making sure that when cases came before, we were losing our jobs, we were being terminated, being held accountable, and where white males and white officers were not for the same infractions. So, folks, if you think that re-electing Mayor Wu is going to advance our cause, and these young people that are looking for someone who is plugged in and connected, that's not what they're looking for. Most people don't even know who Michael Cox is. They don't see him out there in the community in a meaningful way. He wasn't when he was a police officer. He wasn't as he moved up the ranks. Matter of fact, for folks who don't know, he was actually beaten. I don't know if you're familiar. He was the one that was beaten by white officers and left for dead. You think he'd have a better understanding of why you need people of color? Matter of fact, he testified at a city council hearing almost a year and a half ago, in which I testified, because we were fighting to keep the current police exam in place, because there are a number of black officers who could be promoted to sergeant and lieutenant. And he said the reason why black people don't do well is because, this is from a black man, we don't apply ourselves. That somehow we're not intelligent enough to pass these exams and be in leadership roles. And I guess his dismantling of it is just another validation in his mind that this is where we're going. So, folks, if you think that, you should be calling Mayor Wu, you should be calling Commissioner Cox's office, and ask him why there are no black people in any prominent leadership. Don't be fooled when he tells you he does have superintendents at the police academy and these made-up bureaus that they've come up with, right? The symbolic. But Dr. Bradley, what are the most important bureaus in the Boston Police Department?
It would be the Bureau of Field Services, which is your patrol bureau that command the officers in uniform, and your Bureau of Investigative Services, which runs your detectives.
Okay.
Those are your power.
Right.
Those are your power bureaus.
Right.
And most of your officers are actually assigned to the Bureau of Field Services. So when you're dealing with your captain, you're dealing with your lieutenants or your sergeants, those individuals who are making decisions for the people where the rubber meets the road, the patrol officer, they all fall under the Bureau of Field Services. So that is where your power is. Now, you have the highest ranking command staff member in uniform is the superintendent in chief. That happens to be a black man, Phil Owens,
who was a close friend.
Who was a close friend of Cox.
Got the nod.
However, the Bureau of Field Services guy, that guy who runs the entire bureau, the largest bureau in the department, that's where your power is.
Mm-hmm. He runs the day-to-day.
He runs the day-to-day operation.
And people, the significance of that is because every one of those top positions now, other than those, are held by white males. There aren't any females, black or white, in those
Where's
positions.
Nora? Nora still there?
She is assigned to the commissioner's office, and no one knows what her role is. But that was the former person who was in charge of patrol was a black female, the first in the history of the Boston Police Department, was put there before Michael Cox got there. He removed her recently and sent her, she's the superintendent at the Boston Police Academy. The Boston Police Academy runs on autopilot. Recruits will do whatever you want them to do. So you don't really need a superintendent, but you go from being in charge of the largest bureau to being in charge of recruits when they're in the academy, because most of the time there is no class there, so you really don't have a whole lot. You have training that goes, but the significance of that, it's very telling. They say that this woman, and she's more than qualified, that is not qualified to run this bureau. So all of the minorities that are there now, and matter of fact, the chief of detectives was moved yesterday, is now over at the Brick, right? And again, that's being run not by us, but by someone else. So there's really been demotions, even though they didn't get demoted from their ranks, but they've been demoted from any real responsibility, from the day-to-day operation. If you look at the organizational chart, we need to get a copy of the new one, that tells you, based on where you line up, the importance of your position. And that now, there is no one of color, in my opinion, and that includes Commissioner Cox, of any importance there, because the message that he's conveying to the public and to communities of color, I don't have faith in black people.
Well, Larry, as a former commander of the 911 Center, I can tell you with certainty that when the promotions are made, they produce a sheet of call signs, with the very first call sign being the commissioner.
Yankee C1.
The Yankee C call signs. And so you can look at that call sign.
That's what I'm talking about.
Based on where you're falling on that list, it tells you exactly what your power is. So if you look at that, you'll see the commissioner, the chief, the Bureau of Field Services chief, the Bureau of Investigative Services, and it goes right down the line.
Right. Exactly. Internal affairs.
Yeah.
You get deep down into the weeds before you start to see anyone, and by then, it's not even worth. They're not someone you're going to call.
Yeah.
You know, if you have an issue, it's going to be with someone in patrol or investigating.
What is the consequences to some of these changes, you think?
The consequences are there's not going to be anyone that looks like us that is in the decision making on the day to day. When you're talking about deployment of personnel, when you're talking about which detectives are assigned to homicide, which officers are assigned to the district stations, which which officers might be assigned to the community service office, right? Mayor Wu, when she ran, she claimed that she was going to change things around and that she was going to put the deputy superintendents back in charge of the district stations, which she has not done, because currently now, other than B2 in Roxbury, every district station in the city of Boston has a white captain. Running. If you walk into any police station and ask to speak to the captain, if you're not in B2, you will not see anyone that looks like you.
And I think that's significant. I think your question is very important. You know, so at the Bureau of Field Services level, that individual drives the way that policing services are carried out throughout the city. And then you get to the captain each district, and so that individual. So you have the Bureau of Field Services, and the city is broken down into areas, and each area is subdivided into districts. And so you will have the district commander, that individual who's the captain, which is what he's saying, that all of them except District 2 are white. That person drives the way police services are carried out in that particular territory. You know, so if we're talking about community policing, for instance, well, that district commander is the individual who's going to actually set the tone for how police officers are going to interact and react to people of color in the community, period. So if you don't have someone who understands that community, the nuances of that community, then you have someone who can't even begin to fathom why a police officer should react a certain way or work a certain way. You know, so it's important to have, and I always felt that a police department must be the membership, the personnel have to be reflective of the community. Because I have been in situations where I'm sitting around the table, of the command table where decisions are made, and captains are presenting their strategies. And one captain said, "Hey, listen, we're going to do this domestic violence rollout, and we're going to name this Rolling Thunder." You know, in the Vietnamese community. Well, there was no Vietnamese brother at the table. And I happened to say, "Do you realize in 1968 they had a Rolling Thunder carpet bombing?" You know, he was like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." So you don't understand the nuances and the concerns of the community when you don't have someone at the table who can represent that community.
And when to Dr. Bradley's point, when he's getting feedback, when he has a captain's meeting, the only black person in there other than himself is that one black captain, right? We're talking about issues that affect the whole city. It's that who is in the community service office, and Dr. Bradley will attest to. Those are important. Who's supervising those officers in there when you're calling about, you know, quality of life issues? It may not be a 911 emergency, but when that young man, that 15-year-old that you're talking about, that supervisor in there can assign one of the officers in there to work with that family. But if you have no connection to that community or that family, and we know historically, when white captains have been assigned to areas like Mattapan and Roxbury, their only mission is, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of here?
They don't care about the community.
But also, that means also that places like West Roxbury, South End, Brighton, Alston, downtown, they never see anyone that looks like us in charge of those stations. And that's an easy fix, because with the mayor had kept her campaign promise to put the deputy superintendents, those are appointed positions. Those would be people over the captains, right? The 3 stars that would be running the district stations like we used to have when we had black people that were in charge of particularly in Area B, which was Roxbury, Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, and parts of Dorchester. We always had someone. When I was coming up, we had Billy Celesters and folks. We had a person of color running, and it was a connection there. They were the one in charge. Even if you had a captain, that person was over them. So we had some representation. We have no representation currently with this police commissioner. He is so disconnected from the community, in my opinion. that he thinks that only white men can navigate and he wants them to think that you have nothing to fear from him. Because look what I've done. Yesterday, the only black person that was promoted with all of this going on was a black female was promoted to lieutenant. And that was after she, with the assistance of MAMLEO, had filed lawsuits because they had been denying her promotion for years. But yet he gladly promoted a white male to lieutenant who had been charged with beating his family, his son. He had been charged with beating a black firefighter, right? Oh, and what was his penalty? A promotion from sergeant to lieutenant. So this is why this matters, and why the community should be outraged, and why we need a new mayor in City Hall, and why you're talking about voting. People, look, Donald Trump is not the only one. You know, Mayor Wu is running around with her child, and look, I'm not against her having her child, but no other city employee, and she is a city employee, would be allowed to bring their child to work. And I'm not, police officer, but there are other people who are paying for child care. They don't get to bring their child to work every day. The mayor should be no different. You lead by example, right? So, and I think she uses her child honestly as a prop, because she figured people won't tell her how they really feel when she's holding an infant in her hand. It's nothing against the child, but let's be real. She's getting paid by the taxpayers. Imagine if I wanted to bring I didn't have daycare. I wanted to bring my child to work. Even if I was working inside for the police department, or if I was a teacher and just want to have them sit in class, because why do I have to pay for daycare? It's like, do you know who I am? It's this elitist. And her sitting there smiling at this reorganization of the police department. She's there taking pictures with these folks, giving it her blessing. That this is okay. That we have no women, no one of color in any real leadership positions in the Boston Police Department. And the only one is Michael Cox's chief of staff, Nicole Tabb, who has a history of going after black people. So if you think your 15-year-old is going to get any assistance from this administration, brother, I got some ice cubes to sell you on tomorrow because it'll be 80
But
degrees.
there's
Come on. No.
there is a backlash about white male discontent, right? That is spreading across the country.
Yeah.
In other areas, just like what you're describing
Yeah.
with the police department here. You can see it in the White House too right now.
You don't see no black people in this photo.
No, you don't.
Right.
And coming down, you see a spirit that's being echoed that is having impact on changing the structural setup in a lot of areas in our nation. So that's a issue that is, I mean, we're feeling that here in Boston, but it's like nationwide. This discontent has been echoed for a while by white men, like feeling like they were losing ground because of the gains of people of
But
color.
brother, this is a perfect storm of someone that I told people early on what they were getting with this. I grew up, matter of fact, Michael Cox, the current police commissioner, grew up on Winthrop Street with me. So I know his family. I know him. He has more affinity to the other side of the world than to people that look like him. And because during busing, he didn't have to go through it like we did. Right, I went to South Boston High. His family was able to get him into private school. So he is so disconnected, in my opinion, from who he is. And he, you would think that after the beating that he took and was left for dead by folks who didn't look like him, and they try to blame it on someone who did. And then even after he left here for a moment and went out to Ann Arbor, Michigan to become the police commissioner out there, he wasn't there 30 days before they said the welcome mat is not here, and he was put on leave because they said that he was creating a hostile work environment there after 30 days. And really the hostile work was his being a black man, in my opinion. So you would think that these things would shape him not to retaliate, but also to see the climate in this country when it comes to black people's advancement, because what he has done is, in my opinion, has set back, well, we can't pick those people, because look, even a black person has now said that they're not qualified, and he's replaced them with white males.
We was talking about trauma earlier. Like that doesn't just play out in some of the ways we talked about earlier, but it also plays out sometimes in a self-hate kind of way, that we deny our own
There you
people, or we see our own people as less because of the conditioning and the programming that we've been subjected
Right.
to. This also goes to what we were talking about when we were talking about the trauma from the impact from just being black in America. But the conversation is connected to.
Well, it also goes into, I'm sorry to cut you off, brother. It also goes into crime. You know, I don't believe in that term black on black crime. You know what I mean? But when I see a black person commit a crime, I think to myself, okay, what set of circumstances happened to drive that individual that way? But when you have a situation, what America has done masterfully, and I have to give them credit for this, they have really taught us to hate us.
Mm-hmm.
So when you actually hate what the person looks like because you hate yourself, when you have that person at the business end of a 38, it's okay to pull the trigger because you have no value for that life. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so sometimes, you know, it's subconscious. You don't even think about it. You know, so we can laugh out. We come in many different colors. We laugh at our color tone because society has said it's not cool to be what we look like. You know, instead of looking at it as that we're kings and queens, we come from that royalty, and this is what we look like before we were tampered with.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So we have a hatred for
And
who
this is
we are.
why we have to speak out. Like people were saying, wait a minute, you have black police officers, police who are discussing it. Because I've got numerous calls from officers since yesterday. My phone hasn't stopped because they're still there. They can't speak out in the way they want. And you talk about there is that trauma, right? Now these people are saying, why am I doing this, right? Because there's no opportunity for me, you know, because I don't fit the mold for this guy, and he's saying very loudly and proudly that I can't have these people in leadership because they're not qualified. Pastor Hobbs, I know you had something you wanted to say, and we'll grab this call.
Actually, let me just say this one thing because I'm over 60, it doesn't stay long. Listen.
Tell them they got a pill for that.
Okay, leave that alone. Leave that alone. I thought about it once I said, like, here we go. I mean, but the thing is that it is a painful situation when you realize that you have the talent and you have the skills, but you're not accepted because of what the wrapping looks like.
Right.
You know, that God has given you all these talent, all the skill, everything that you need to get this done, but you're coming in the wrong wrapper.
But here's
And so therefore you're not accepted.
he has been given pretty much everything, right? He is a civil service sergeant. That is the highest rank that he achieved in the Boston Police Department, and he was appointed sergeant detective. He was made a deputy superintendent because of the beating he took. That was part of, in my opinion, the agreement that he had with the city. So he hasn't worked hard to get where he is, and he got there because Ed Davis thought he was the most, in my opinion, he had a lot to do with the selection process getting there because he would be the one that he could manipulate the most, and he was absolutely right in his finding in this day that he is definitely the right person if you want to have him go after other black people or make it look like black people are incompetent. Michael Cox is your guy. That is me speaking. That is my opinion because I know the real Michael Cox, and this is him on display. I know Pastor Hobbs will grab this call in a second, but I know you wanted some comments.
So yeah, there's several comments. So Sister Michelle said, yes, that was a terrible promotion, and yes, she had no reason to take her kids to work. She could afford daycare, unlike a lot of us.
Absolutely. When she was, here's the irony: when she was a city councilor at large, she had her kids in the daycare downstairs in City Hall. She paid for it. Now she's doing it at the taxpayer's expense. This is not an attack on a mother, but this is no other city employee would be allowed to have their child at work with them every day. And I'm not talking about, I know I wouldn't even consider it being a police officer, but there are jobs, if you're a librarian, if you're a teacher, you would love to eliminate child care costs, right? To be able to bring your child to work with you every day. And we know that the city employees are helping chip in. Come on, let's be real. Come on.
So more comments. Rose Pierre says, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Malcolm X said it. Sometimes black cops were only allowed to arrest black people, not white people. Yes, you're right. It hurts.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right, we'll grab the caller. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Helen. How are you?
Good night. Hey, I just wanted to add my comment in because,
Sure.
and now with Phil Owens, who I don't remember this, Larry, but who called you, Larry, at the drop of a hat and falsely accused you of calling him an Uncle Tom.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know if do you remember that call?
I do.
No surprise, Owens was a former Menino driver, and now he's been made superintendent-in-chief.
Mm-hmm.
Another backstabbing cover artist who was a Davis lackey, who even went so far as the cover-up for a raping openly white supremacist Confederate flag-loving cop and retaliated against any who report. And Owens probably falsely accused you on purpose to drive a wedge and then, pretended it was an accident? It's like, of all people to accuse, he accused you, who at the time,
Really?
I didn't even know that well until years later.
Yeah. No, and to his credit, we had a conversation about that, and he had some misinformation, and, we cleared the air. And honestly, not defending, Phil Owens is someone that I've had a very good relationship and still, in some ways, do. I don't see him as a Michael Cox. Michael Cox is dangerous, and and that is on full display for black people, and people should not be. I mean, you think about it, you don't really see him out in the community in a way that is meaningful, right? He resides, you can reside where you want. He resides in a more affluent neighborhood of the city of Boston, not where he grew up at, right? He's now the police commissioner, and you don't see him out there making that connection like Willie Gross. Willie Gross, say what you want, he was always out there in the community. People knew who he was. This is someone that, if it's not on his schedule to interact with black people, doesn't have any desire to do so. And these promotions was just another example of that. And I told people, I warned them early on, and it was just amazing to me when he made that statement at MAMLEO headquarters. You're talking about coming in somebody's house acting like Scrooge, right? Coming in and stealing their toys. You're going to come to the black police organization and make a statement that the police department is too black, and I need to undo that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's. But again, with Owens though, it's like that was a misinformation. He had completely a name was given to him, nothing at all. He had supposedly the only person he jumped to was you, which to me was kind of was really like, what? Like, of all people in the world that you think would ever say something like that, and he's going to jump immediately to accusing you of it, that's just completely wrong.
Well,
all that you've done for the community and all that you've done for minority officers, not even just within BPD and the Boston Police Department, but elsewhere in other departments in the rest of the state.
Right.
Of all people, who's going to jump to you about it?
But this is why I won't be a hypocrite in this matter, because when white commissioners have not allowed us access, have not given us opportunities that we deserve, that we're more than qualified to do so, I've called them out. And I would be a hypocrite to sit here and say, but he's black, so I should just overlook this. No, this is wrong in every sense of the word, and people should hold people accountable. I mean, like I said, to take and dismantle where we had a huge footprint in the police department, and all of the unraveling is under a black commissioner, some would call a black-on-black crime. That should not stand. That should not stand.
Well, definitely not. And I mean, even look at the way that there was, on top of that, it's like, you have Phil Owens, who also was another one that was on special ops. But even if you look at, things that have hit the news, it's like on Twitter, over the John O'Keefe case, there was a story of a black man reporting Confederate flag T-shirts being worn by other special ops guys, including Dan Humphreys, who's now on BPD command. So,
Right.
Two
of the promotions yesterday were people who have some really controversial and really questionable past, and that were elevated to higher positions. Because even Dunford, who was promoted to lieutenant, the lieutenant, in absence of the captain, is the person that's in charge of the police station. You have someone who has had a history of violence with black people, and even with his own family, is now going to be in charge.
And those were the people. It's like, I hadn't seen him wearing one, but I saw others. And then you have all those Menino, Davis cronies, and even civilians, like the one you mentioned, Nicole Todd, out wearing a jacket with a gold BPD badge, like she's a sworn, not even just a sworn officer, but acting like she's a sworn, supervisor of some sort. It's like, even a retired DE agent who was posting during the Karen Reed trial mentioned about Humphreys. And it's like, it's stuff like that where it makes you, it's like, okay, even when I was looking at the photos of Owens' badging ceremony, it's like, it made me question, I'm like, who looks that miserable when they're being promoted? I'm like, is that what you look like when you sell your soul to the devil? I'm kind of you look at things, I'm like, what is that department with all the people that they choose to promote?
But this is why
Makes you
we
shake your head.
need a new mayor, because the mayor was there yesterday with her child, giving her blessing, saying she's okay with this. You know, I mean, how do you look at this? You walk in the room, even if she didn't know who these people were, she walked in and see. I would have had, hey, no, we're canceling this promotion. We need to reshuffle this deck. What are we doing? Where are the black people? Where are the? It's like the Spike Lee when he walked into the restaurant. How come there's no black people on the wall? Right? Where are the black people? And you see Cox, he's not so proud of it. Matter of fact, there's a photo that someone sent me, right? Where he is actually, this is Cox, right? Can you find him? It's like, where's Waldo, right? I'm having Jimmy look at it, right? There's a police, if you're so proud of this, why aren't you in the prominent? He's way in the back there.
Where is it? Oh,
Where is he? Right?
Yeah, I saw it, brother. That's what thank you.
You know, if you're so proud of your work, right? Why are you hiding?
Well, think about this one, right? So you've seen there's the recent news articles and everything else about how the Communist Party, the major Communist Party player, has been, orchestrating like hundreds of thousands of dollars of donations to Michelle Wu and her campaign.
Yeah. No,
And it's like, and I called it years ago. It's like, but you look at even just the things that the Communist Party does.
Yeah.
They aren't exactly known for being, like leaders in terms of diversity or having people who don't look like them. Exactly, people who look like them in power.
No, well, that's
no
why
women in leadership. They'll have women do their work for them and whatever else and be part of the party, but they don't put women in leadership.
Well,
They'll make them puppets like Michelle Wu, but
look at what happened. Like I said, there were no women promoted yesterday, and even the ones that are in leadership roles in the department, right? You were a former police officer. They're all in insignificant positions, and it's not to disparage them, but we know how where the power lies, right? It is all now with white men and Cox, who has, in my opinion, no affinity for people that look like him. He thinks that this is his power base, this is his brain. These are the people that can get him across it, and it appeases the other side. Say, hey, look, I'm doing just what Donald Trump does. I'm just putting all white people around me, because they're the smartest people around, right? I mean,
it's all people they can control, all people that will do what they say, all people that will.
Well, I think he thinks it endears him with others, but. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. And I knew this was going to happen, and it's on full display. I wish I could have been wrong in this instance, but I'm not.
Well, brother, all I can say is this. We could be very judicious in articulating the issue, seeing exactly where it is and making sure that we see the rationale behind it. But ultimately, the question is, what are we going to do?
Well, that's the thing, because we're talking about Jimmy. It's because this all comes into play, right? Yeah. Because when Jimmy is here, our guest here, and I said to him, I ask you this question: what person in the Boston Police Department that you have a relationship with that you could call to help you with this young man?
No one comes to mind. Right?
And that shouldn't be, because when I was coming through, you had the Billy Celestes, you had the Dr. Bradleys. There were people, and that's what I'm talking about. So it's almost like if you want to be elevated in a person of color, then you just need to make sure you're only taking care of yourself and not the community. But you put this facade out there, right? Of these are people here to help you. They're here to help themselves.
But Larry, if I may, the other question would be, if someone was sitting next to him of a different culture and asking the same question to that person, the Irish culture, what person do you know? I guarantee you that person would be able to give you 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different names.
And they just added more to the communication line.
So they have access to power,
right?
Whereas we do not.
No,
you see, and so that's why I said the policing should look like the community that it serves, right? Because you will have someone to say, hey, listen, I can bring in this, or I can talk to this particular individual in government, or this individual. Yeah. Policing is the only, other than the fire department, policing is one of the few agencies that are open 24/7, even on Christmas.
That's right.
So to say that we don't know anyone in law enforcement, in my opinion, that's appalling. Not on your part, but the fact that the police department is not out there to give you the exposure.
You don't know anyone
you can talk to.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a great point, Willie. I think a good way we should do this is leverage the membership. We have members of MAMLEO who are members of the Boston Police Department who can be there to support their community.
Right, but this thing that changes, Helen, with and like we were talking about with Jimmy, is now people not sometimes they register to vote, but then they don't actually go out and vote. We have to change, send a very strong message. We will no longer be ignored, and we will no longer be on the sideline watching when we don't have any type of interaction in the process, right? That we're not part of the selection because we know who are good leaders. And that's what happened. Well, that's why we had the Dr. Bradleys and the Billy Celestes and folks like that, is because we had some input into who was going to be leaders in our community. They didn't just throw people in there that look like us. It was intentional. And that's what we fought for. And we've gotten away from that. And that's why we end up with people like Michael Cox. Right.
That's the way to do it then, by votes. I mean, look at remember the old kingmakers of yesteryear.
Right.
How did they get the power they got with the mayor's office? Votes.
Right.
They went into the community and they got votes, and they were able to influence and show people this is who you should and shouldn't vote for. And by showing that they had that influence, that's what gave them a voice.
Right. People know Donald Trump is as dumb as a rock. People know, how do you bring somebody in who has bankrupt every business that he had and think he's going to run the economy? So what we're seeing now, but they didn't care, because what he said was, I'm going to go after those people that you don't like, right? That was all the qualification he needed. And shame on us for not saying, you know what? We're going to deploy the same strategy. Not to go after people, but we're going to make sure that we get behind people who are doing the work. Why someone like you? Look, if Dr. Bradley was a commissioner, Jimmy, if he heard a broadcast like this, him and leadership would have called you in his office and said, how can I, just like we called you here to the broadcast when Dr. Pastor Hobbs said, hey, Jimmy wants to come on the broadcast. I said, absolutely. Absolutely. This is how it should be. We shouldn't be running from helping people, right? But we're not helping those people. They got in trouble on their own, right? We know other people who would have been in trouble. Yes. But we know we worked in areas where those kids didn't get taken to jail. They got taken home.
That's right.
Right? Well, that 15-year-old.
If you took him to jail, you had a problem when you got to jail, because they would say to you, why are you bringing him in here?
Exactly.
You know, why don't you just take him to his daddy?
Right.
Well, you can't take this black kid to his daddy.
Exactly.
Or his grandfather or his uncle, but you have to take that person to jail. You know, I used to get in a lot of heated conversation in the locker room.
After we book him.
Yeah,
we need him in the system.
Like, people don't understand how we used to get into those conversations in the locker rooms. Like, hey, listen, you know what? I got one too, Doc.
Right.
You want to pull it? I can pull mine.
There you go.
You know, that's how heavy it got because of how they were treating people.
Let's grab this call. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable. Caller, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Do you want to comment?
Yes, I want to make a comment. I want to really lead us back into.
Can we just get your name if you don't mind?
I'm Stacy Borden.
Oh, okay.
I am with Michigan Reentry Services.
Okay. All right. Good morning, Stacy.
Really appreciating the conversation.
Yes.
Larry Ellison has been really generous and supportive of our organization and our ground work that we do in the community, and really appreciating Mr. Marshall's intake on this impact of what happens in our community from our history, generationally, historically, and Dr. Bradley. So I just kind of want to lead us back into some of the conversations that we was having at the beginning of from incarceration to leadership. The work that we do in our community, or the work that we do in reentry of bringing people out of these carceral systems.
Right.
As we know, we're one of the lowest, or the lowest, incarceration states, because we're out here as formerly incarcerated people, really leading our people out of the system and creating leadership.
Right.
We zoom into the prisons every week.
Right.
Giving an array of services and letting our people inside know what we're doing out here. So I kind of want to lead us back to that conversation about community.
No, absolutely. But see, Tracy, I think these are all...
a young woman named Andrea James.
Right, but Tracy, let me Stacy, I'm sorry. Yeah, Stacy.
The National Council.
Right. Stacy, let me just interject here, because I think I hear what you're saying, but they're all intertwined, right? Because by not having the right leadership in the city and in the police department, right, that makes your work much harder. Because I remember when you were trying to get the building there, and there was so much objection against it, right? And MAMLEO and what we were supportive of it because we knew that's what I'm saying. That should have, because if the police commissioner had come out and given it his blessing, that would have made a huge amount of difference. If the captain or the commander of that area would have came out in support of it, that would have made a huge. But you got a lot of pushback because we don't want that here. But we have them all over the place, right? That's why I say these are not disconnected. These are all connected, and why this is all intertwined. Because if you don't have the right people, a phone call like Dr. Bradley and I know we worked out there. A lot of times their kids didn't get it because it was dealt with on the front end, not on the back end. So that you have more work on where a lot of these kids would have been in the same situation as our kids, but because a phone call was made on their behalf, or because when they were brought into the station, that's so and so, or they know someone, or somebody's already making a call to make it go away. So this is why it's important, this election, why we need the right people in leadership, why we need a new mayor in the city of Boston. And people can choose whoever it is, but I tell you, the Mayor Wu has failed on all of this. She claimed she was going to clean up Madison Cass. All they've done is disperse it across the city, right? And put fences up there to try to keep people, and it's still bad down there. Where's been the improvement in our schools? Where's the last report that has come out, right? Because we know they build prisons based on your reading level and at the age of 7 years old, right? So all of these things, housing, right? I mean, so these people coming out, Jimmy, where are they going to live? It costs close to $1 million to own a home in the city of Boston. Where are these people going to live? So what are we doing to address these issues that she claimed she was the most qualified person to address them? Where are we at?
So
That, and also we should also make sure people are aware of who else is actually running.
Yeah.
Because for them to not vote for Michelle Wu, they need to know who is available for them to vote for too. So that they're aware. I think it'd be great to be able to get more people on that are running against Michelle Wu for the office of mayor, and so that they have an opportunity to speak and for the community to hear them as well.
We've had several candidates on.
We also know historically, as soon as one of our people in our community, black and brown people that run, are often targeted.
Right.
And so I think that we all need to step up. And that's what I was leading into to say that Andrea James is running for governor. We need someone.
She's running for governor?
We need a lot of us to step up and start running. We know that they continue to create the narrative to say that they're the ones who's lessening crime. They're the ones who's lessening recidivism. They're the ones who continue to create this narrative so the budget can continue to go into the Boston Police Department's budget, correctional budget, and we're not stepping up to run.
So you said Andrea Jones is running for governor? Andrea James. I wasn't aware.
James.
Okay, I wasn't aware. This is what I'm saying. This is news to me.
You need that sister on your show.
I think there's two sides of this, though. I do hear, and I can appreciate what the sisters are saying, that we need to have some individuals in the community understand the issues in the community running for these offices. But we also need to have a movement, not a moment, but a movement for voting. You know what I mean? We often, it's abysmal. Our participation in the voting process, because what's ended up happening, these people come to our community at this time, and then we won't hear from them anymore.
Well, that's why they say you get the government you deserve.
So we have these events throughout the city. There need to be registration tables at these events and education at these events around voting, and why it's important not only to register but to actually pull the level. That's where our problem is that we have a lack of voting participation because the establishment has given us reasons for not to vote. It is not for us.
Helen, I want to give you a quick 30 seconds before we let you go, because I want to give Jimmy the last few minutes to talk about some solutions.
Already?
Yeah, I know. Helen, before we let you go.
Yeah, my last few comments would be, it's like, hey, got to make sure black, brown, yellow, that one isn't one to see us out either.
So Helen,
and we have first Asian and first black before that.
We need you in this fight. I want to connect with you so how we can work together in getting in people here registered but not registered but actually vote. I'm going to call you this week, I promise, and let's work together in making that happen. Thank you, my sister. I appreciate you, and be safe.
Thank you.
Stacy, before we let you go, any final remarks? Did we lose Stacy? Okay.
She's probably on hold.
All right. Okay.
Are they asking me to
Stacy, any final remarks before we let you go? All right. Well, So, Jimmy, we got a few minutes. We want to give them to you. What are some of the solutions you think that could help with this 15-year-old and these issues that we're seeing in the city? And a lot that were raised here because.
Comment, but I feel like I already said it.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm still on.
All right, you are. Listen. So before she says something,
Andrea James for governor.
okay.
We can hear you.
All right, we can hear you. Thank you. All right, we heard that. We'll get her on. We'll get her on the broadcast.
Yeah, you're good.
One common theme is we need to have a more unified effort.
How do we get there, brother? Because we talk about that all the time. Help us.
We're getting
Okay.
there. This is part of that process
Okay.
too. The process needs to be appreciated.
Mhm.
It is, in fact, a process, and that's not
Okay.
a one-time event. What you gentlemen are doing through this medium is part of that process.
Okay.
Educating people, putting information out there, getting people's attention about important matters that relate directly to them. The issue about the leadership in the police department relates to the communities. It relates to the situation with the 15-year-old.
So let me just stop you there for a second. I don't want to interrupt your flow, but how do we get people to understand, like when you're saying that Stacy didn't really think there was a connection, and there is, and when I outlined it, how do we get more people to understand that there is a connection with that leadership and people who were incarcerated on how they got there? You know, we're trying to connect the dots that on the front end, if we have the right people in there, we're not saying we excuse the behavior, but how we work with the people who are involved in it.
Communication, education, sharing, networking is necessary. We're probably the only group that don't advocate for ourselves in miles, you know,
Dr.
and that's
Bradley.
that's a serious problem. Like, you know, all groups advocate for themselves, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. The Jews, they have anti-defamation league.
Never
You say
again.
something about them, they're on top of that. Or if you do something, you know, that indirectly even affects that group, they're on top of that, you know, and they're addressing that. We don't have that.
But Jimmy,
at
we have a
play.
convicted felon in the White House, and people are saying all of this stuff that they knew is wrong, and we won't get behind people who are doing right, who just are trying to uplift us, right? The other side is showing us they don't care. We have to have that I don't care attitude. We're going to elevate the right people. We're not going to elevate somebody who's doing wrong, but we're going to get behind the people who are doing the work, like yourself.
There's a fear that is presenting itself through like what's going on in the White House. I mean, the what is that? The
DEI.
The DEI issues, the issues with
Immigration and all.
inclusion, the issues with progression of people of color and black and brown people. There's a fear because there's been a real
Attack on, right?
development
Yeah.
that has happened over the last decades that are suggesting that the momentum is going to continue forward. So we got to stay faithful because we've done tremendous work as a people. I think any other
We've
group,
got about a minute. So
it would have been difficult to come out of that condition that we were in, found ourselves in, up till now. That wasn't all that long ago. The Civil War ended, what, 1865?
No,
Right?
we
And-
don't learn our history.
Okay, then you factor
doomed
in
to
Jim
repeat it.
Crow
Right.
and all the other stuff. Then you come into the 20th century, and you still have this effort against these people.
Donald Trump is firing any qualified black person in real time. Just fired the black woman who was the head of the Library of Congress. Why? Because she's black, right? And this is why I'm talking about and Michael Cox is firing people because they're black.
Yeah, I want to make sure that.
Well, and because he can.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I-
because
no
you gotta get the
consequences.
power. We got to get power.
Yeah.
And power comes from the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we mobilize the people and unify the people, the power is there.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
got to unify it.
Dr. Bradley,
I think
about a minute.
the Civil War ended in 1865 for hostilities,
Right.
but it's still ongoing.
It's still ongoing.
It's still ongoing.
And but there was other efforts that were
Yeah.
agendas that were put in play
Yes.
too, like to continue with the effort of
Yeah.
targeting and oppressing
and
black and brown people.
Speaking of that, to be continued, Jimmy, we got to have you back because
Yes.
I tell you, this has been a fascinating conversation. 2 hours, how quickly they go by. We need to make this a regular segment so that we are keeping people informed and enlightening, but also arming them with information that clearly they don't have or they don't understand. So, Jimmy,
I appreciate
Marshall,
you.
thank you, my brother.
for welcoming me.
You are always welcome here at the round table. You have a seat here.
Yes, sir.
He's all comfortable now.
I'm comfortable
He's got
now.
the right
Now,
haircut.
We need another hour.
Yeah,
He fits right in, man.
exactly. Dr. Bradley.
Be blessed.
And happy Mother's Day to all the moms.
All the
out there.
moms. All of them. We couldn't be here without a mom.
There you
man.
go.
One
We
love
can't
to
be
the
here.
moms.
There you go.
Exactly.
All right.
They say I am a dreamer, 'cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle. So if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge. If your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies you ain't living what you spitting. If your money's so long, why your dog's in prison? Why your baby mom's stripping, why your mom's still living in that same broken home that you used to sell piffin'. You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strap. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst. And the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks. This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer, 'cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle. So if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the under.